Hey friends, welcome back to Wednesday Night Light presented by YouTube Premiere. We have been walking through a series on parables, and parables are earthly stories with spiritual truth. And so we're going to jump right into the parable of the prodigal son. And now this is a parable that I'm sure you've heard before, but the cool thing about parables is that with the depth of spiritual truth that they have, you can come away with something new almost every time. And so I encourage you to listen and expect something new from this familiar parable today. And so turn to Luke chapter 15, starting in verse 11. Luke chapter 15, starting in verse 11. And as you're turning there, I want to give us a little context. Jesus is presenting this parable in Jerusalem, in kind of the middle of the city, and he's teaching, and there's a crowd of tax collectors and sinners that are surrounding him to hear this message, people that are not very highly regarded in that culture. And around that group is a group of Pharisees and legal experts, and these are like the moral police. And so they know the law like the back of their hand. They claim to keep every letter of it every day, and they look down on these tax collectors and these sinners. And so they are complaining that Jesus is spending so much time with them and teaching them and eating with them. And Jesus overhears this complaining and presents two other parables and then this parable of the prodigal son. So with these two people in mind, Pharisees, legal experts, and then tax collectors and sinners, we will dive in to Luke chapter 15, starting in verse 11. Jesus said, "A certain man had two sons." Now, two sons, these two different types of people, Pharisees, legal experts, tax collectors, sinners, that Jesus is going to address. But first thing to notice is that they are both sons, both equally loved by God with equal claims to the inheritance that God provides. Continuing on in verse 12, the younger son said to his father, "Father, give me my share of the inheritance." Then the father divided his estate between them. Soon afterward, the younger son gathered everything together and took a trip to a land far away. There he wasted his wealth through extravagant living. This younger son represents these tax collectors and sinners. And this younger son asks for his inheritance now. This idea of inheritance are these promises and these blessings from God. God wants to give to us. Think of the Garden of Eden. Everything was given to Adam and Eve, and there was, the one requirement that they listen to God and obey God's voice, and obey his direction for right and wrong. And so sometimes these promises and these blessings from God may be promised, but kept from us at the time, as we are raised by God and sanctified in his word and his commands, to the point where we're ready to receive that blessing and not abuse it. But the younger son here requests to have that inheritance now. And it says that he wastes this wealth on extravagant living. And so this kind of paints this picture of these tax collectors and sinners of this life of pleasure, this life of going from one fix to the next, of having what you want, when you want it, where you want it, and how you want it. No one can tell you what to do. You are living your truth, you are living your life, and you're living it to the fullest. And that's this idea of these tax collectors and sinners, and this represented by this younger son. Now, it goes on in verse 14 to say, when he had used up his resources, a severe food shortage arose in that country, and he began to be in need. He hired himself out to one of the citizens of that country, who sent him into his fields to feed pigs. He longed to eat his fill from what the pigs ate, but no one gave him anything. And so this is the effects of living this kind of life that we see. He uses up all of his resources. He's worshiping creation over creator, and creation is temporary. And so he uses up this wealth that he's been given. And what it leads to is this desperation, that he is in desperate search for anything to satisfy that need, that craving, to the point where you may even hire yourself out to someone else, that you'll do whatever it takes to get what you want and what you feel that you need. You become almost animal-like. He's living among these pigs and eating what they're eating. He almost himself is an animal at the whim of his desires. Now we'll skip ahead a little bit, starting in verse 29. And this is speaking about the older son. And it says, "He answered his father, 'Look, I've served you all these years, and I never disobeyed your instruction. Yet you've never given me as much as a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends.'" And so this older son represents the Pharisees and the legal experts. I mean, they feel that they have served God all of their years and have never disobeyed his instruction. And so you can kind of pick up on this sense of self-righteousness with these people, because we know that they can't possibly have never strayed from God's instruction. They can't possibly have never sinned, and yet they feel secure in their self-righteousness. They feel secure in this fact that they have always tried to do what was right, that they have served God, they have waited for his promises and his blessings. They have been obedient. They have acknowledged his existence, unlike the younger son. And notice that he says, "You've never given me as much as a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends." Living this moralistic life of self-righteousness, sometimes you get to these places where it's like, what has this gotten me? I've been ostracized from my friends. While they're off having fun, I'm the buzzkill or the stooge or the goody two-shoes. And I've missed out on fun experiences. And for what? What has it gotten me? So I've presented both sons, the younger son and the older son. And we've talked about this idea of inheritance and how each son approaches it. And so to kind of illustrate that idea, I've got one of my favorite treats here, a cookie, simple milk chocolate chip cookie. Got some on my Bible. Okay, nailed it. So this cookie, think of this as the inheritance, and there's some rules with this cookie. So I can either eat it now, right, and it's the only cookie that I get, and I'm on my own for any more cookies that I might find. Or I can wait until I'm instructed to eat this cookie, and then there will be many more to come. Now, it seems like a pretty easy decision, but even now, I'm very tempted to just swallow it whole. But the younger son, right, took this cookie and just ate it. And then after eating it and using up those resources, thought, where do I go now? And had to hire himself out to anyone else that might provide him with a cookie, or maybe he takes one from someone else, any way that he can get more of these cookies. Whereas the older son obediently did not eat this cookie, but now might be kind of wondering, man, did I miss out? Like, it looks like a delicious cookie. Should I have just eaten it? What has it gotten me to not eat it yet? And with that in mind, let's look at how the father approaches both of these sons. In this parable, the father represents God. And as I said at the beginning, they're both sons of this father. They're both equally loved by this father. And so let's see how he approaches each of them, starting with the younger son. In verse 17, it says, "When he came to his senses, he said, 'How many of my father's hired hands have more than enough food, but I'm starving to death? I will get up and go to my father and say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I no longer deserve to be called your son. Take me on as one of your hired hands.' So he got up and went to his father." And if you're this younger son and you live this life of seeking pleasure, man, isn't it tiring? Don't you get to those times where you're just so empty and so tired of chasing one good feeling to the next? And you remember what you had with God, who is the source of living water, the source of everything you could ever want or need. And you left that for emptiness. And so you come to your senses, and there's this shame and this guilt and this regret. And you go back to your father thinking that, he will not accept you back. You've made your decision. But maybe he can just have you be even just a lowly servant in his house would be enough. It would be better than the emptiness that you had. But this is how the father responds. It says, while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was moved with compassion. His father ran to him, hugged him, and kissed him. Then his son said, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I no longer deserve to be called your son. But the father said to his servants, quickly, bring out the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Fetch the fattened calf and slaughter it. We must celebrate with feasting, because this son of mine was dead and has come back to life. He was lost and is found. And they began to celebrate. Man, how good it feels to have your shame and guilt and regret met with mercy and grace. This father sees the son coming, still a long way off, runs to him. Now, you have to understand that in this culture, it was actually socially unacceptable and kind of embarrassing to run. It was like, you lost some of your dignity if you ran. And I tell you, I would love to live in that culture, personally. But think about that. This father is running, undignified, after this son with mercy and grace, moved by compassion. And he doesn't even acknowledge the son's statement of his lack of deserving. This son says, I don't deserve to be your son anymore. And the father doesn't even acknowledge that statement, but says, go and get the best robe and a ring, and let's have a feast for this son and celebrate his returning to my presence. And then there's the older son. Verse 25. Now his older son was in the field. Coming in from the field, he approached the house and heard music and dancing. He called one of the servants and asked what was going on. The servant replied, your brother has arrived, and your father has slaughtered the fattened calf because he received his son back safe and sound. Then the older son was furious and didn't want to enter in, but his father came out and begged him. And jumping ahead to verse 30, but when this son of yours returned after gobbling up your estate on prostitutes, you slaughtered the fattened calf for him. So think of this older son, right? You've spent your whole life trying to do what's right, placing yourself above the younger son because you have stuck by the side of the father and obeyed his commands, right? And then this younger son comes back, and where's the justice? Why is this younger son not being punished for disrespecting the father and taking the inheritance and wasting it? Why is so much being lavished upon this younger son? And you have to wonder if this older son might be thinking, man, I could have just gone out and lived an extravagant life and done all of the things that I want to do on the inside and then just been forgiven. Why did I waste all this time doing what was right? But in verse 34 it says, then his father said, son, you are always with me and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad because this brother of yours was dead and is alive. He was lost and is found. Again, mercy and grace. And notice, even starting back in verse 28, the father is begging this older son to come in and join the party. He wants that older son there with him, celebrating the return of this younger son. And in verse 31, he says, you are always with me. Everything I have is yours. Man, think about that. This older son was so focused on doing what was right and on making sure that he was following every letter of the law. You have to imagine he also had guilt anytime he thought of disobeying, and he had to, just force himself to do what was right and resist those cravings. And he was so focused on this that he missed out on the fact that he was with the Father and everything the Father had was his. I mean, think about this cookie. If you're so focused on not eating it, you miss out on the baker who gave it to you, who wants to be in relationship with you. So when we go through this parable, I hope what you notice is that when it comes down to it, there's not much different between these two sons. Whereas the older son places himself above the younger son, they're both empty to the core. And the younger son tries to fill it with pleasure and fill it with good feelings. But the older son tries to fill it with self-righteousness and doing what is right, and in this way to earn something that he could never earn, but he already has. And in the same way, the younger son already had everything his heart could desire, but he thought he would be a better Lord of his own life. So what are these two sons missing? They're both missing the Father. And notice the celebration when they receive the Father. And when we have received God and we know the greatness of being in a relationship with him, should we not then also rejoice when someone else has? You know, maybe that person has wronged us, but if they've been given forgiveness, we should recognize that we too were forgiven and rejoice that they are coming into the fold of God with us. And so I have 4 questions to kind of close us out with. And, you know, I'm a big journal guy, so if you want to journal through these, I encourage you to. But really take these questions seriously and process through them, because I think it can really help you understand this story and apply it to your own life. The first question is, which am I? Am I the younger son or am I the older son? Do I try to find pleasure in every little thing and I'm the Lord of my own life and no one's going to tell me what to do, and you know, I'm going to live life to the fullest because you know, I've only got one life? Or am I the older son, desperately trying to prove myself to God by doing what's right and feeling like I'm earning something, putting my faith in my own ability to do what's right every single time? And the second question is, am I empty? Am I empty? And this is a question, especially in a time of isolation like this, that might bring up some negative emotions in you. And so if you're processing through this and having a hard time, please reach out to myself or Michael or Abby or a friend and pray to God, because you're not alone in this and you don't have to stay in that emptiness. Because question 3 is, how can I engage in a relationship with God right now? Not in a way where I'm trying to earn his grace or earn his attention by doing what's right, but also in a way that makes me realize that everything else in this world is empty without God, and that this desire that I have to fill that hole with pleasure points to the fact that I was made to fill that void with God. And the fourth question is, who needs to hear this good news? Who can I share in this celebration with, that God loves me and wants to be the Lord of my life and give me everything, but in a way that I receive it with gratitude and with submission to his will, which is always good and always better than ours. So those are the 4 questions, and I hope you spend time with those, and thank you for engaging with this teaching, and cheers.